I hope you can all see this. Great. Great. So welcome, everyone, and really looking forward to this session. And we're really looking here at putting power to work in the humanitarian system. We know there's been huge amount of discussions around power and power inequity. So it's really important to understand what power is all about. So this session is really going to focus on that. So we'll be looking at the concept of power, understanding the different dimensions of power, and also share the experiences. So you will see as I share the slides with you, I'll be coming to you and really asking you to share your experiences around power. And I really would love to have a real interactive session, but your experiences are really important in this. So what is power all about? Often we are aware there is power around, but I think we don't reflect enough on what power is. So I'm just going to share you here some of the key things, right? Firstly, power is the ability to create or resist change. That's one of the key aspects of power. Power is very systematic. It's everywhere. If you look around all over in your working environment, in your personal life, it's everywhere. Power is very dynamic. It's contextual. In different places, it shows up differently, right? It's intersectional. That means that it's around gender, it's around work, it's around your religion. So it really depends. It's very intersectional. Power is not finite, right? But it is accumulated. Over time, it can be accumulated, or you can lose it very easily. Power is also structural and cultural, and we will come to that in a minute when we talk about different aspects of power. But power is also very personal and interpersonal. And I think that the personal aspect of power is absolutely key in terms of looking at and understanding how we are connected to power and also how we use it, or it can be abused as well. But all our lives are shaped by our identities, our relationships, and social factors, right? And these different identity and relationship actually intersect to really form privileges. And these privileges can lead to oppression. It can lead, depending on the context, right? Depending on the power structure in the community or in the country. So such things as patriarchy, ableism, colonialism, imperialism, racism, right? All of these, homophobia, all of these contribute.
Homophobie.
You can hear me? Okay, I think there was somebody unmuting, but it's essential to understand the power structures to address the inequity. I think I'm hearing the Spanish translation.
I've muted. Smriti, go on.
Perfect. Thank you. So it's really important that we understand what is power and which structures powers exist in as well. But let's start with the individual, because I think this is absolutely key. At the heart of power lens really lies individual, who we are and where in the system we are that affects our power. So if you think about it, individual power is different in different contexts. If you're in India, it's very much different to where if you're in a different part of Africa to in Latin America. So our position in relations to the wider system of the society also affects power. We're born in lives rich in resources. Some of us are born in rich resources where we have connections. We have certain types of social identity, and that such as race, gender, class. combining all this, when it intersects, right, it creates either barriers or access to power and resources. So I wanted you to think about yourselves and think about what was your first real awareness of power in your environment. Just think back, even to your childhood, anytime, right? When did you first become aware of power? And I'm going to open this up to you. So if you can put your hand up, I'm going to stop sharing the slide. Can you remember first awareness of power? Just reflect for a minute and put your hand up and share with me. When did you first become aware of power? It can be anything, right? It could be, I don't know, becoming aware of your power as a sibling, right? If you're the oldest child, you have more power than your siblings. So it can be anything like that. So just put your hand up and share with me, please. And it can be anyone. Anybody would like to share?
We'll ask people to put it in the chat because people can't access their microphone. So please do put it in the chat.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, please. So put it in the chat. Your first recollection, right, of power around you. As I said, it can be in the playground, it could be in the family, right, or anywhere around. So just put that in the chat. And it's really important that we reflect on those things, right? And then also think about how did that make you feel, right? Firstly, having that power, being aware of it, but then when did you also realize that you have power as well? All these things are really good to reflect on because it really makes you more aware of power. So if you can put it in the chat, that's great. Then I wanted to talk about collective power. So whenever we join forces, whether it's informal or formal groups of movement, there's always power dynamics that form. And these power dynamics are not inherently negative, but they can work to exclude people in obvious ways or more subtle ways. So it's really important to be able to learn to spot them. This is why it's so important to think about how power works in the environment that we work in. And remember, again, power is not always negative, right? But it's how it's used that creates the issues or not. Let's talk about now civil society power, right? And which is in which we work, right, as a sector. So we know that throughout history, it's civil society in its widest sense that's been the source of transformative change, right? Wherever there is injustice, civil society try to work on those issues, right? Sometimes because of the relationship, sometimes because of the power dynamics, but these power dynamics also exist in the sector, right? So there are power dynamics within the civil society sector as well. Because of relationships and because of some resource constraints and others. So we need to make sure that we're also aware of that because sometimes there's this idea that civil society, because it's there for doing good, that we actually ourselves don't have these issues, right? So it's really important that we think about that. And to be truly effective in terms of driving change, we need to be able to work better together, right? And that means that we have to make sure that we think about the power dynamics within the civil society sector as well. We know that during COVID time, for example, the community groups, the funders, the civil society organizations really work together in different ways to have a more effective response to the crisis, right? But that was because there were some pre-existing relationships, right? And where perhaps we worked better with each other and try to address some of those issues. But power exists also, we know, within organizations, right? So different groups have competing agendas. And sometimes we are thinking similarly, but other times we are also competing for funds. And we know this, right, in our environment. And because of the interests of funders and other more powerful groups in the sector that may dominate the agenda, determining on how and how much and like what social change can happen, large organizations can squeeze out the smaller groups entirely. So we need to be aware of those things. And I think this is another reason why even within our network, for example, we have bigger organizations and smaller organizations, and we need to be really aware of these things. What I want to do today is really look at the issue of power through a very structured framework. And I want to introduce this framework because it's a really clear way of looking at different aspects of power. So this power framework, the cube framework, it looks at three different dimensions. One is around levels. So as you see from here, that there are different levels of power that can exist at the global level, international, national, or local level, or even household level, right? But also there are spaces where power exists. So there are some closed spaces, invited spaces, and claim spaces. And there are different forms of power that exist: invisible, hidden, and visible. We're now going to go a bit more into the details of this framework, because it will really help us to interrogate more where power lives and then how to deal with inequity of power issues. So, as I said before, we do have issues around power in different parts, right? In the different levels of the hierarchy. So I wanted to find out from you, in terms of household level, what type of power exists there? Just think about it. Take a minute to reflect on these four levels. And please, in the chat, if you can note down what kind of power dynamics exist within a household, at local level, right? At national level and at international level. So I see that you have, great, you have a lot of chat going on. And please do write up where you are, where these powers exist in your environment, right? So if you can is it possible to unmute for a minute so I can hear from people, please? Workplace, great. Anywhere else in the household level, where does the power exist in the household level? And I think you know, right? Parents, thank you for bringing that in, because between siblings and parents and how much power they can tell you where to go, not to go, right? One holds power over the other. Great. Gender, really interesting, right? Between mother and father and the elders, because I know in my society, the respect for the elders come over everything else. So in a way, they have power. Where else? Oldest child. Thank you very much. I'm the youngest child, so I know what the oldest child power is. Financial dependency, public and private space offices. Great, thank you very much. And patriarchy present in household as well. Great, thank you very much for some of those examples. And those who are working and non-working. So if you're a housewife, you have different power than if you are a working parent. Great, thank you very much for all those examples. Any examples you have at national level where power exists? So that you really think about it. And I've heard these in the different conversations we've had. So at national level, what are some of the power holders? If you can reflect on that as well. Yes. Political parties, thank you very much. Any others? Government officials, brilliant, thank you. And we've just had an election where we saw power changing hands, right? Institutions, thank you very much. Excellent, thank you and business tycoons, churches, excellent, thank you very much. So that's at national level. Now let's think a bit about national and international, right? Where are some of the imbalances in terms of national, international, or global level, right? At global level and international level, what are some of the power imbalances, or who holds the power there? Treaties, thank you very much, right? Some of those treaties or norms that are being set up, veto power in the council, right? Security Council. Yes, military power. Great. Thank you very much. You're really on the ball here. Exactly. Wealth and debt. So there's a lot of things at international level as well. Great. So I think we can go beyond now to the next bit that we want to talk about. So now let's talk about the spaces, right, where power is acted out. So spaces for participation. So for example, closed spaces. So where decisions are made around in a closed group, right? So this space, closed space, is controlled by a group of people by the virtue of their position or their appointment. So I can give you a quick example, right? So a board of an organization, right? They have been appointed, right? And it's a closed space where decisions are made. So it's not that closed space are bad, right? But if there's lack of transparency, and lack of real knowledge about how they make decisions, what kind of decisions they are made, then it can lead to abuse of power. So in your spaces, in your environment, what are some of the closed spaces that you have noticed, right? So these are type of spaces which are closed, where decisions are being made behind closed doors. So if you have examples of that, please can you share those in the chat, right? Because it's really important you reflect on those things. And as I said to you, just to reiterate, right? Closed spaces are not bad in themselves. It's only when those spaces are not transparent, people don't know how they function, and there's no information provided, then it becomes unaccountable. So any kind of examples from your environment would be great. So please do pop them in your chat. Closed school and workplaces. Yes, any other spaces that are closed spaces in your environment? Just think about it. It's really important that we think about this, because this is where then you have to have strategies in place to ensure that those closed spaces are more accountable, right? That you make them more transparent, and that you also work to make them more open than before. Let's talk about and carry on writing. So have a more reflection on these closed spaces. Really important that you think about it. The second one, invited spaces, right? So people are asked to participate, but within certain set boundaries, right? So an invited space is created by policymakers who want to engage civil society and other actors, right? So that they can consult with you. Usually, the agenda, who participates, and how remains still tightly controlled, right? And policymakers can use these spaces for either a meaningful participation with inputs, or it can often also be create a bit kind of veneer, right? To just create legitimacy. So those spaces are really important spaces, but you need to see how they are functioning. So in your environment, are there invited spaces? Can you think about those? And please share them in the chat with me, because really important we understand where are there invited spaces, and when there are invited spaces, how are they functioning, right? Do you feel that there's meaningful participation, that you really have a say, and that what you are saying actually is influencing some of the decisions or a policy or something, right? So that makes it more, I think, more meaningful participation, rather than just being there to tick a box, right? So it's really important to think about that. And I want to now talk also about created spaces, right? These are spaces where less powerful actors claim the space, where they can set their own agenda, right? So, for example, a space that's been created by civil society forum, right? The civil society coming together, they're setting their own agenda, they decide who participates, and the activists will be the one who will set the agenda and run with it, right? So the ideas are exchanged between different organizations to build solidarity, to build a common vision, right? And to influence others. So these created spaces are really important, because when people feel that there are closed spaces, invited spaces don't work, they create their own spaces, right? It's a real contrast to the closed and the invited spaces. Can you think of any space in your environment that are created by you, right? To influence an agenda. Can you think about what kind of examples you have at your country level or in your environment? And if you can share them with me on the chat, please. It would be really good to hear. Excellent. So created CSOs for me, understand the importance of having truly inclusive spaces. Great. I have an example from Pakistan. Working groups, yes, working groups are created spaces. Any other examples from your country level? Thank you very much. Participation in People's Council, great, really good example. LGBTQI groups, right, coming together and creating their own space. Students' Union, Community Protection Committees, great, from Palestine, excellent examples. And it's really important to have these spaces that you can really make sure that you can influence the agenda. So one of the things that I feel are creative spaces, right, within the START environment is the hubs, because I've been involved in START from a very long time, and I've seen that the hubs have been created as a space for locally led. And I feel like that's, this is where a great example of created space, right? Where there was a feeling of this inequity. How can we take locally led forward and creating this space for yourselves? So great, locally led hubs are great spaces which are created. So I wanted to give that as an example as well. Any other examples? Yes, girl councils, making space in membership of UNHCT. Great. And there are many, many other examples like that, right? Where you have created a space. But often you have to really fight for that. So I want to just show you a cartoon here. Um, in one side. So the interpreters, you will have to interpret this, right? So sometimes I feel my life lacks direction. So you know what these are, right? They are these insects that come and they attack the crops, right? And so there are these two sitting here. So then they are saying, but when we get with the crowd, we can have real impact. So here's, I know it's a funny one, but here's what happens, right? When you're on your own, it's very hard to have impact. And also, you can get backlash. But if you work with others in solidarity and you create your space, you claim your space, that's when you can have impact. So here's an example, a funny example of how you can create and claim your space. But I want to now think about power that takes different forms, right? And this is really, really important aspect of power. And there are three different types, right? One is visible. So this is observable decision-making mechanisms, right? Where you can really see how power works. The next one is hidden, which shapes or influencing political agenda from behind the scene. So they may not be in the place, but they still are able to influence the decisions and shaping agendas and things. And the last one is invisible power, so norms and beliefs and socialization ideology, which really impacts us. I'm going to go to this one in more detail because it's a really important aspect to understand for all of us. So if you think about the invisible power, it's really this making of these rules which are visible, right? Which include structures and processes. So a formal decision making like laws and policies, right? Is visible who is making them and how those rules work, right? So that's visible power. Organizational processes or hierarchies, right, are attempts to formalize power dynamics and ensure that they are accountable, but it is not the only way power operates, right? So there are some things that are very visible. You know who is making the decision. It's very, very obvious. So that's what we call visible power. Then there's the hidden power, right? And this happens behind the scenes. So, for example, somebody's not in a decision-making committee, but they send an email seeking to influence or control the formal visible power, right? Shape what is being prioritized and decided and how the decisions are enforced, right? So it's happening behind the scenes. It's not very obvious. It's not visible. So these communications then, they set the agenda for the meeting, for example, or the kinds of acronyms and jargons that is used or social code where it's very obvious to some, but not to others. And it's always different ways that power can exclude people from with the first-hand experience, right? So the ones who are not in the know are excluded. So the hidden power actually is a quite a powerful thing if you are not aware of it. And I wanted to share this with you. as an example, right? We are most happy to fund your HIV program as long as they can promote condom use, right? This is one of the examples. So in a way, there's a kind of a hidden thing, agenda, and a almost like conditionality to providing the fund. So it could be, in some ways it's hidden, but it's also very visible to the person who is sitting there. So can you provide an example of a visible power in your environment, something that you know who is in charge, right? Where the decisions are making place, right? What are some of the visible power in your environment that exist? If you can share that with me. Visible parliaments, unions, great. Government offices, great examples. Any others where it's very visible, where the power lies? What about your boards, right? Focal points, great. Thank you. Any others? Working groups, religious institutions. Any other examples of visible power? Police and the military. Thank you very much for bringing that in. Really important, right? So these are really, right? Oligarch running the economy, tycoons. Great. Thank you very much. Great visible power there. How about giving me some examples of hidden power? What are some of the examples of hidden power? Anything that you can share with me? So think about it and share it in the chat. And also let's think about the other power, right? Invisible power. Now, this is really, really important because invisible power is really about belief and ideology, right? Sometimes people keep telling you something and you start behaving like that, right? So for example, if you've been told over and over again that you don't have capacity, you must start feeling like you don't have capacity, right? And I hear a lot about local actors not having capacity being a kind of a dominant talk, right? So making sure that you really think about it, right? How media, education, religion, social rituals, right, help to socialize particular beliefs and values and narratives. And these narratives, really, you internalize those narratives and you start behaving like that. That's invisible power, right? So invisible power is really internalized. It shapes what you feel, what is normal, right? What is acceptable, influencing how each of us feel about ourselves, right? And about opinions of others as well. This one here is a really dangerous one because it's so subtle sometimes, and because it's so part of sometimes culture that you don't even realize that that's what's happening, right? And it can really influence how you behave and how you act. So any examples of these types of invisible power? Can you think about, especially around socialization? I mean, one example, for example, is about around women and girls, right? Their roles. What kind of power, what is normalized for women and girls? What kind of behavior is normalized, right? Is a really important one, because when we think about gender customs, thank you very much, Yoli, for that. really important. Some of the customs that are held, right? They really entrench the way things are done. I wanted to share this with you. It might give you inspiration. So this person here is a laborer, and you see him saying, "Thank goodness I've got this job. It's all I'm good for." Maybe this person has been told all his life that he's only good for laboring, right? He has no other talent. So it can really impact over time, right? If you've been told over and again. And then this one here. So if you look on the left-hand side, they said my farming days were over, then I lost my legs, right? Because, that's in a way, people with different types of ability or disability are treated in a certain way, but they were wrong, right? So she found solutions. So this is empowerment, right? That you get empowered, that you don't stay in that position. So it's really important to think about this kind of invisible power, right? And somebody has written in the chat, elderly, that also that there are some. So in some societies, elderly are treated very different to other societies as well. So think about these when you're thinking about power, right? These are different dimensions. But I also wanted to talk about the systematic power, right? The systematic power is really deeply embedded. It's kind of almost, in your operating system, right? Is within the structure of the society, structure of the organization. The logics are, really, I would say embedded, right? It determines everything. It determines the economic, political, social relationship, and it permeates into the institutions, right? And it really shapes our lives. So the systematic power is very, very hard to change, and to do that you really need good strategies. But awareness of all the other dimensions of power can help to shift this kind of systematic power. And I think for me, one of the issues around inequity in the international aid system is around this systematic power, is so deeply embedded. So how do we work on that together? It's a really important question to ask. But, power is, as I said to you at the beginning of all this, right? It's not all bad, right? But if you have power over people, it's a traditional relationship, right? And some of you have already given in your example, parents have power over children, or elderly have power over the younger, right? So where there is this power over others, it's this traditional relationship, right? Sense of dominance or coercion. You coerce somebody to do something. So that, I would say, is negative, can be negative use of power when you have power over others. Sometimes you have to have power over others, but overall, if that's how you work all the time, then it can have real negative consequences. But if you look at power too, it refers to unique potential of every person to shape his or her life or the world. When based on mutual support, it opens up possibilities, right, to joint action and power with others. So power to and power with are really two really good ways in terms of working with others. So power with, it really refers to the synergy that can emerge through co-creation, partnership, but collaboration, right? So looking at collective action and building alliances. And power with is much stronger in terms of how you used your power to really do good. And I think in the social sector, this is what we really aim to do, right? Power within is a really important aspect, because if you don't have personal confidence, often that's linked to culture or religion, as we were just saying. or your identity, right? It influences how you act, right? Whether you feel legitimate or acceptable. And it refers to really gaining a sense of self-identity and confidence and awareness, right? That you can then do something. So that aspect is really important. So we really need to think about these different ways of power. But I wanted to really emphasize this one because this is a really key aspect in terms of how things can really change. Because we come from spaces where there is injustice and we are fighting for justice or fighting for one cause or another, this continuing feeling of victimization when you've been in that situation, it can also create issues internally, right? Even when this kind of injustice no longer exists, we still keep thinking of ourselves as powerless. So this results in powerless rage, right? A fear of being victimized again, right? It can lead to bullying and abusive behavior later on. The victim can adopt behaviors of his or her past abuser as an ongoing protective strategy, even when it's not required. And this happens a lot in social movements as well. So the ones who are actually fighting for justice carry on fighting or carry on feeling victimized, and then they do it to the other people. So we have to really watch out for this thing here of power under, because it's one thing that can really, I think, lead to very negative consequences for our sector. So I wanted you to reflect on this. Are there cases where you have felt powerful, but also powerless, right? And have you ever acted on power under, right? Just think about it, because sometimes when we've been for a long time fighting for something, sometimes it becomes a habit, right? And we forget. And we might start acting in that way. So it's really important that you reflect on that. And think of examples, right, in your environment. Is that something you have observed, right? And if so, it's really important to be aware of it, right? Because it can really lead to negative things, and we don't want to use power negatively. You know, if we work with power in the right way, it brings changes, right? Everyone can learn to see power more. If everybody can see power more clearly and take action into, you know, your day-to-day work to transform the structures and culture around you, right? It can create either exclusion, injustice in the social sector, right? Or if you work with power in the right way, you can create inclusion, right? And stop the injustice. So imagine what we can do to achieve together if we accept that power we have and use it to unleash power for all of us, right? To work together in solidarity to affect change we need. It's really vital for the future of the social sector. I think how the civil society sector shows how they use power is really important, because people are watching, right? We've seen that civil society space is shrinking in different countries with the governments and other spaces where you know, more and more regulation is coming in. There is backlash against civil society. I think we need to be more aware of how we use power and how we work together so that it's not excluding people, right, within our sector as well. And that we can start now. Really important to think about those things. I know I have gone through this. What I wanted to do is really give you a bit of a background, right, on power, and really go through the different aspect of power. But I also want to take any questions that you may have. And the boss is always right to be questioned. Thank you very much. Anzur, it was great to put that in, because that's also one of the issues that comes up, right? And also that whole idea that just because we are in the social sector, actually we do things well all the time. We don't. Power exists, right? So working together and being aware of the power is so important. I just want to let you know is that we have some handouts on power, and we call it, getting to know power a bit more. Power literacy is really important. And we have also like a workshop assignment, which you can do to really ensure that you reflect on power more systematically. Firstly, looking at your own personal reflection on power, right? How your relationship with power, and then also how does that show up in your work? Because our experiences in the past around power impact us, right? And it shapes the way we use power as well. So it's really important to make sure that we reflect on both of these. And because we said earlier, power exists within organizations as well as between organizations in the networks that we work, it's really important to have joint reflections, right? And come up with strategies to I think, really work on addressing if there are power inequities. And we have also a framework, right, that we can share on what you need to do to address the power inequities. But I will stop there. Please do ask any questions that you may have. I'm just looking at the question that's coming up. Just a second. 5 minutes warning. Great. Any questions anybody has? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the Great. I'm just reading some of the chat, right? Yes, it does. Santur, you say that power relations and systems take time. It's a process. So in a way, you're right. It's a process, but the process starts with our reflection, right? It starts with this analysis that we can do more systematically together with each other, and identifying where some of the problems lie, and then think about, okay, how do we address them? So I hope that that helps. And we will share with you this presentation and also some of the reading that's there, and some reference material, so you can think about this further. I think I'm going to stop there. If there are any other questions, please put them in the chat and we will try and answer them. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye for now.